This afternoon's session is all about the Minimum Viable EOSC, MVE, its implementation, its status, challenges and expectations. So we've heard a lot about that already over the last couple of days about what is the MVE, and I'm very pleased to say we have a very important and well-known list of speakers to come in this afternoon. What we're going to try and do is look at the MVE from a number of different aspects, from the sort of infrastructure providers point of view, from the regional projects point of view, from the clusters, science clusters, from EOSC Future, of course, which is one of the cornerstones of this, but also we'll get the views as well from in the panel from member state representatives, and also from one of the task forces that's working on defining the financial sustainability of the MVE in the long term. So we're going to go through with a number of presentations, but want to start first of all with Tobias Wesensdahl from the European Commission, from DG Connect. He's a Deputy Head of Unit. And Tobias, if you'd like to come along and give us your introduction on the procurement, the platform, and also the modelling.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for inviting me here. It's really nice to be here. I must say I've prepared a very long speech, and I think considering that much of this has been said this morning, I'll try to be a bit shorter and look into the things that are of interest. Now, I'd still like to start by reminding of the European Data Strategy. We heard about it 2-3 times this morning. So you remember, European Data Strategy published in the year 2020, February 2020, starting from the perception, and we all know it, that access to data and the ability to use it are essential for innovation and growth. So what does the European Data Strategy aim at? It aims at making the EU a leader in a data-driven society by creating a single market for data, where data can flow not only across countries, but also across sectors. And why? Yeah, of course, for businesses, for researchers, and the public sector to benefit from it. So how does it do it? On the one hand, the EU Data Strategy sets out a cross-sectoral governance framework for data access and use. And we have heard it already this morning, such as in the Data Governance Act or in the Data Act. And then, equally important, the EU Data Strategy came forward with the idea of 10 common data spaces, 9 thematic ones, and EOSC. I'd just like to read here again what it says on EOSC. It states that EOSC will be the basis for a science, research and innovation data space that will bring together data resulting from research and deployment programs, and it will be connected and fully articulated with sectoral data spaces. Just before I move to the next slide, that we'll be looking into how to do this interconnection with other data spaces, but I'd also like to say that both in the data strategy and in the staff working document from 22 on common European data spaces, not only EOSC has a prominent role, but also the fair data principles are quite well acknowledged. I hope this next. Okay. So we all know that there are many different dimensions that need to be tackled in order to achieve the vision of fully integrated and interconnected data spaces. These comprise governance ones, these comprise technical ones. On this slide, I'm just going to show one practical step from a technical viewpoint to achieve the idea of interoperability between data spaces. And this is the conception that through a common smart middleware that will enable cloud-to-edge federations to work all over Europe and for all different kinds of data spaces, we kind of create, let's say, a common glue for data spaces to communicate one to the other. And it's because of this reason that the EU, through the Digital Europe program, is actually procuring an open source smart cloud-to-edge middleware, and we call it shortly Simple, because the rest is just unpronounceable. And Simple will offer generic services across common data spaces. So it will provide the basic building blocks that serve as an enabling layer for the interconnection of the various data spaces, but also, if you want to use it, also for the federation within a certain data space. Now, in the case of EOSC, for example, Simple will ensure the interconnection capabilities with other data spaces and also other initiatives like Destination Earth, on which I'm going to talk a little bit in the one but next slide, since you asked for it. Now, I would like to also mention something that's not on this slide, and sorry for this omission. There's not only the technical, let's say, solution smart middleware simple being procured, but also since the 1st of October this year, we have up and running the Data Space Support Center. I think it's very important to keep this in mind, and this is also a good contact point for some of the EOS projects, and we are doing our best to establish contacts there. For example, we provided names of different projects. I think they've reached out already to EOSC Future. So the Data Spaces Support Center, the idea is to really coordinate the development of the different data spaces. By bringing together the stakeholders and probably creating something like a community of practice platform. By looking to the needs of the different data spaces and identifying common technical requirements and with this common building blocks. And then further on also, by creating a platform, by creating a website to exchange best practices, something that we had heard also here today, which is going to be important in order to foster an aligned uptake of data spaces. Again, apologies for not having this on the slide yet. But I think this is important, as I said before, contacts are being made to EOSC Future and to many other EOSC projects these days, if they haven't happened already. Now, when we talk a little bit more about the platform, I think all of you know this slide better than I. So this is the scope of the platform. This is the scope of what actually it has been provided by the EOSC Future, as you can see. But we all know that such a platform cannot be built from one day to the other. So in the first place, we're going to focus on the core technical platform, on core coordination functions, and some horizontal functions. And this is fully in line with the strategic research and innovation agenda in terms of achieving a minimum viable EOSC. And later on, we can build further on this minimum viable EOSC. As said, you can see here all the information that we can at this point in time publicly disclose on the procurement of this platform. Unfortunately, it is all the information that you can already find published. I can't go beyond this. But I think most of you are aware, and you have actually very much contributed, and I would like to thank you for this, of the efforts that have been made earlier this year. With the prior information notice on the 4th of May, with 2 webinars having taken place by the end of May and beginning of June, and actually the open market consultation exercise still having kept open until the very early stages of August. So we've very much received your comments, and we are grateful for this. I would like to invite you to go back to the web links if you need further information on this. As concerns, let's say, the boundary conditions, the frame of this procurement, you see them here. It is the budget, the indicative budget is 35 million euro. The indicative contract duration is 36 months. And we will have the contract in place by 2023. Now, when we have this core platform and the minimum viable EOSC in place, and with this I move to the last slide, we will be able to also link to other initiatives. And I would like to introduce here, because we clearly see a link there and probably even a learning, and it's actually a bilateral learning, bidirectional learning, an initiative like, for example, Destination Earth. Some of you have heard about it, some others not yet. But what is Destination Earth? In Commission language, I would say it's a flagship initiative of the European Commission that addresses the twin challenges of the green and digital transitions. That's true. But what do we really mean is, the objective of Destination Earth is to create a highly accurate model, a digital model of the Earth. To be quite honest, a digital twin of the Earth. So what can we do with such a tool? Well, this tool, first of all, goes down to an unprecedented local scale. So you will be really able to look and observe, to monitor and predict local phenomena. Think about what this means, for example, for flood extremes, for other weather extremes. But also, it will help us to understand the effects of climate change at a local scale. And it allows this digital twin to look into hypothetical what-if scenarios. And with this, of course, it provides you enormous amount of capabilities. It will provide you, I must say, enormous amount of capabilities for your decision-making, for making really tailor-made, effective, and targeted policies and measures, more targeted even, on a variety of issues, including on climate change adaptation. But what I would like to highlight here is not only the ambitions of this initiative and what it will bring to the policymakers and I must say to the users, much beyond the policymakers. What I would like to highlight here, listening to the interventions made this morning, is a couple of points that I think that are very relevant. Such an initiative, the idea of a digital twin of the Earth, is probably not completely new. But why are we in a position now to start building it? We're in a position to start building it because of data having become more available. Because we are in the process of really having data becoming more interoperable. And I say it's a process starting, and EOSC is part of this. To combine data from space and ground observations, to combine other data that hitherto we couldn't have, seamlessly in an interoperable manner. But also, we are getting now into the position to have the necessary computing power to run such models. Without high-performance computing, it would be impossible to run these models and to go at this granularity, both in terms of time, but also time intervals and steps, but also in terms of the spatial resolution. And at the same time, we harvest and build on cutting-edge science and on new developments like machine learning and AI. So that's to say, this is an example where you can really make a difference in a pressing, urgent policy need, but really going at the top and pushing the boundaries of what we have in terms of data, in terms of digital key capacities, strategic capacities that we are putting in place. Now, I will not go into all the level of detail that you can see here. It is funded to a large extent from the Digital Europe program in the first phase with 150 million euro and complementary research from the Horizon Europe. And very important to say here that this initiative is implemented through strategic partnerships with the European Space Agency, the European Centre for Medium-Range Weather Forecast, and EUMETSAT, and it will be rolled out in 3 phases. The only thing I would like to say here also, that by design, the FAIR principles will be respected in this. And with this, I stop here. I hope I didn't exceed the 10 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, so building on that introduction, putting it into context, what I'd like to do now is give you a little bit of history of the MVE. We've looked at the future. How did we get here as well? So if I can have the slides. If you could bring up the slides, that'd be very helpful. Great, thank you very much. So how will it evolve and where are we now? So first of all, going back, the term itself was introduced in the context of EOSC back in 2018 by the second high-level expert group, which was chaired by Silvana Musella. And they introduced this idea of a minimum viable ecosystem. And the term, of course, got picked up from the idea of a minimum viable product. So the concept you understand, it's the core and other elements we need to get the whole thing going. So that started back in 2018. That was the first reference to the MVE. The next significant reference was the results of the work from the Executive Board Working Group on Sustainability that was chaired by Rupert and Lydia. Out of that, we see that it got a bit more specification of what was in there. It went down to we have a core, a federated data, and the exchange. Before that, it wasn't really explored in that way. But that wasn't enough. It needed to go further there and see how we expand on that concept. Then the architecture working group expanded on that definition, added in these other elements that you see here, and you see that reoccurring today. So it's been a progression of what is the MVE over these number of years. Building on that, we now have, of course, EOSC Future, the project which was launched in April 2021. Here it highlights as well the interoperability framework, which has become recognized as being essential if we want to make all these different elements work together, but also, as Tobias mentioned, how are we going to interoperate with other data spaces that coexist in this world? And now, as well, in the first tripartite event that took place in December 2021, you heard that this morning, it was agreed by the members there that we should try and deploy a viable EOSC platform, including the core, the exchange, and federated data. So that is essentially the MVE. And if you look in the latest multi-annual roadmap, 23-2024, you can see that it's refined there as well. And we see figuring as well the interoperability framework. So these are the essential elements which over time have become part of the MVE. Okay? So Tobias has highlighted as well that there's the ongoing procurement, which essentially will come up with this platform as an MVE. Can't give us more details today, but he's given you a taste for what it would be. And we're all looking forward to having that available to us and see how we can build that use its functionalities in the future. So with that little introduction, what I'd like to do now is go through the other speakers. As I said, we'll go through different aspects of that. And we'll start with Klaus, from EOSC Future. So please, as Chief Information and Technology Officer from GION, the floor's over to you.
Thank you, Bob. And also on my account would be nice to have my slides. Yes, thank you. Yes, so what I'm going to try to do in the next 15 minutes or so is give you a bit of a flavor of what EOSC Future is and does, and the EOSC platform that it builds, without stealing too much thunder from Isabel and Niklas and I miss one, Raoul, of course, and also because Bob threatened that he would throw things if I ran over time. So I'll try to keep it short. So what is the EOSC Future project about? And I know that many of you have heard me or other people from the EOSC Future project speak before, so I'll keep it short. But I think it's useful to remind you of what we're doing. We are essentially building that MVE together with the regional projects, together with the thematic projects, etc. And the two speakers before me mentioned the word federation, and I think that is probably in the end the most important aspect, that we make sure that we build this glue layer between different communities, and I will get back to that in a little bit. And what is very important is that my biggest fear, and I've said this before, for the EOSC Future project is that we spend 30 months building something that works, that is functional, that satisfies the requirements, etc., but there are no users. So, very important, throughout the project, we want to stay in touch with users. We want to hear from you what works, what doesn't work, and we need you to help us make it better and fit for purpose eventually. So one thing that is a little bit out of sync with the rest of my presentation, but I did want to bring it in, is this slide. This is normally an animated slide that takes 5 minutes or so to get through. I will not do that today. But I wanted to point out one important element from it, and that is on the bottom right, you see that platform that we're building in the EOSC Future project, this catalog of catalogs, if you want, and an EOSC portal that can access that. But that is not all that we want to do. We have no ambition nor belief that it would work if we would say, okay, guys, from the clusters, now throw away your functioning environment and start using ours. The idea is that we do build this, but we do this to enrich your own environment. So the idea is that a researcher that is used to work in the context of, say, EOSC Live or Elixir, will still keep using the tools, the methods, the applications that he or she is used to. There will just be more. There will be more resources they can find. There will be more tools they can use to make their research more powerful. And I think that is an important thing to realize, and that's why I thought it useful to bring this slide up. This slide has been shown before. A little bit of memory lane. This is how we started. We came up with this in the architecture working group with this architecture picture to the right that implements the MVE. We pretty soon came up with an improved version. And when I say we, most of the people that were involved in creating that architecture in the architecture working group are now also in the EOSC Future project. So it's really a continuous process of improving, learning lessons, and make something that eventually will work. This may look a little bit complex. Maybe I should have used the one that Tobias used instead. That looks much simpler, but it gets worse. What we came to realize very soon is that federation is nice, and bringing tools and data from different communities together is all nice, but you need a common language, and we ran into that. We didn't use the same terminology for the same thing. We had different architecture diagrams that somehow looked alike, but were not completely. So we decided to adopt an overarching modeling principle, the so-called C4 model that has worked very well for us, and I encourage you to have a look at it if you have a complex project to run. And basically what it does, it makes you drill down into the complexity of a system. So you start very high level, and if you are able to read it, then I hope that the picture to the right is will give you an of course, yes, that's what I need to build experience. The fact that it's in black is unfortunately a side effect from the tool that we're using. We're working on making that better. But if we then drill down into the different components, it gets very soon very complex, very ugly, but what it did bring us is a consistent view over the whole system. And I am always in favor of simplification if possible, but we found that that is not possible. If you look, for instance, at the yellow lines, that is the AAI function in the platform. The fact of the matter is that AAI touches almost every element of the whole architecture, and we need to say something about it. We need to say how that all fits together. So what we do in turn after this picture, that is sort of everything, we then drill it down into individual functions and make it again a little bit simpler. But this diagram is the work of many days of discussing how the different parts of the platform work. So what does it bring us? Well, we have an EOS core that is working, that contains all the main elements that you need to operate a platform, things like monitoring, help desk, etc. We have lots of resources, millions of individual resources, a couple of hundreds of services, and of course, soon we want to have many more, and again, that's where you come in, bring your stuff to the platform. And we implement that federation model. The interoperability framework, as I said before, we are the glue layer. I used to say just the glue layer, but that may have raised some expectations by the reviewers that we could not really satisfy. So actually it's pretty difficult to build this glue layer. Just the glue layer, that is the hard part. Getting consensus on the exchange of data, on APIs, etc., is really tough work, and everybody that has ever worked in standardization will recognize that. But as one of the reviewers once asked, "Are you really telling me that you spent half a year talking?" And I said, yes, and that was pretty quick. Usually it takes much longer. So we have a challenge here. We want something soon, but we don't want to lose the power of getting broad consensus in our community. And then there is the actual resources that are in that catalog and that can be used through the catalog or also directly by the different communities. And if you want to remember one of my slides, then it's this one. This is the only message that I really want to give you today, and that is, it is working. We're open for business. Please come and try it out. I'm not saying it is perfect. We know it's not. We have a list of things that we want to improve on, but it's there. It does contain these millions of resources. You can search for things. You can order things like storage, compute, etc., from a variety of vendors. And it integrates with that core platform that I was talking about. So not everybody integrates with all of the core functionalities, and that is fine. Take from the EOS core what you want. So if you want to say, of course we need the AI Federation, and that is actually what all the participants do say. So the AI Federation is there for all the participating organizations. But if you already have a working help desk, then you don't need to use the EOSC help desk. But for instance, for the monitoring, it would be very convenient if you would plug your monitoring into our monitoring so that we can monitor across the system. Those kind of things we want to be flexible on. We also expect that over time changes. Maybe if you have to get a new help desk system, you may think, maybe we can use the EOSC help desk system. That's fine, come and talk to us, and we discuss that. But the main message remains, it is working, it's there, come and try it out. Tell us what doesn't work, bring your resources to us, and we are committed to make it fit for purpose, make sure that it satisfies your needs. There are a couple of things that are in the pipeline that will come pretty soon. I actually don't think I should spend much time on that. What I think is more important to point you to the fact that there are a whole bunch of other sessions tomorrow and the day after tomorrow that go more into detail to the various parts of the platform that I now just skimmed over. Especially the session tomorrow morning from 9 to 10:30 does essentially the talk I now did, but then with much more detail. And if you want to hear about very specific items from the platform, you can see them here on the list. You also will notice that in one case you have to choose which session to attend, but I'm sure you'll be able to find the right people if you want to know more about one of the other sessions. With that, I want to thank you for your attention. I do want to make one last remark, and that is that I was supposed to present here together with my colleague Diego Scadacci from the EGI Foundation. Unfortunately, he was dealing with some kind of virus that has been going around for the past couple of years. I don't know exactly what, but we had agreed to split. One of us would present, the other one would be in the panel, but I guess you're stuck with me. Thank you.
Okay, after we've covered these 2 points, now's the time to look at the different other contributors are coming in as sort of clusters of projects. And now we move on to Raoul, who's going to cover the Infra EOSC 7 projects and their contributions to the MVE. Raoul, over to you.
So, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for the invitation here. So, I will, of course, give you like a very short overview of what the Infra EOSC 7 projects are bringing with respect to the implementation of the MVE. It's important to say that I will not go into details into each of the project services. I mean, there are many different sessions during this event where this is being covered, and of course, you also have representatives of these projects, of course, here that you can go to. I am coming from Poznan Supercomputing and Networking Center in Poland, and I am a coordinator of one of the Infra EOSC 7 project, which is called Reliance. So in order to understand better our contribution, let's go back first to the specific challenge of the 07 topic. So basically, if you remember in the topic, it was to grow the offerings available in the EOS portal with a set of state-of-the-art research-enabling services that can be used across many different research communities and then can be supporting the adoption of open science principles. As a result of this topic, 5 projects have been funded: C-Scale, EGI ACE, OpenAir Nexus, DICE, and Reliance. So if we see this in the context of the diagram of the MVE, which has been presented before, we can see that while the EOSC Future is implementing the backbone of EOSC, we as 07 projects are actually enriching the EOSC Exchange with a set of key services and IT infrastructure and resources that are delivered via virtual access mechanisms. Actually, if we go and see this more in detail with respect to the architecture, which was also presented before, you can see that all of our horizontal services and resources are coming from 07 projects that can be used, of course, for things like data, compute, and other research-enabling activities. And based, of course, on these services and also from other EOSC core and thematic services, you can build these virtual research environments or execution environments, thematic execution environments. If you see also the functions more in detail that Klaas was already mentioning before, of course, there are many of them have been listed and proposed, but our services are falling into 2 main categories: the functions related to the cross-disciplinary added value functions, and the services related to the Earth observation added value functions. So I will go now very briefly into each of these projects, starting with DICE. So DICE is enriching the EOSC Exchange with a set of services supporting the whole research data life cycle. The services are, of course, horizontal, so they can be used by any research community, and they are, during the project duration, of course, they are delivered in the access of free at the point of use. Important thing here is that all of the services are already available in the marketplace, and they range from data discovery to repositories, data archives, and personal workspaces. Of course, DICE is not directly contributing to the EOSC core, but the services from DICE are connecting and using and relying on EOSC core. So you can see here that they are, of course, connecting to the AAI Federation, Resource Catalog, Help Desk, and currently also working in monitoring, accounting, and order management. If we go to EGIAs, they are bringing 3 main contributions to the EOSC Exchange. The first one is like the distributed compute platform, which is based on a hybrid infrastructure. The second one are the services and support in order to deliver this compute platform. And the third one is a set of thematic services that enable the scalable data analytics. If you see this in numbers, EGIAs actually brings already a very large number of providers of cloud, HTC, and HPC, plus, of course, some additional compute and data management services and platforms. They are delivering these services based on different Additionally, on top of that, regarding the second kind of services supporting this platform, they are bringing several EOSC compliant ones like AAI, the help desk and monitoring and so on. So these are services already are compliant with the EOSC capabilities in the core. And finally, regarding the third one, the thematic services, they are already bringing 15 of them, which are serving thousands of users with 5 data spaces that are hosting data of petabytes of data in the platform. OpenAir, on the other hand, is bringing a wide range of services for research management and scholarly communication. And you can see this in the EOSC Exchange. They are bringing, or they can be categorized in 3 main categories. One is services for publication. So here you see things like Zenodo, like the catch-all repository, or Amnesia for data anonymization, or Argos data management plan. Services for monitoring. Here you can see, of course, Open Citations and the OpenAir Monitor dashboard. And services for discovery. So here you have things like the OpenAir Explore and OpenAir Connect, which allows you to create some kind of scientific gateways for communities. These services, of course, are supporting different types of stakeholders, obviously researchers, but also SMEs, funders, institutions, and others. And they are building on top of other OpenAir services that are part or contributing to the EOSC core, which we can see here. So basically, the EOSC core contribution of OpenAir is basically coming to the Provide, OpenAir Provide, which is a kind of dashboard for research data product providers where they can register the data sources that are compliant with the EOSC interoperability framework. This data is actually feeding then the OpenAir Research Graph, which is one of the key parts of the EOSC resource catalog that then can be used by EOSC Explore for discovery of research data products, or EOSC Accounting for getting statistics of the usage of research data products. Cscale, on the other hand, is bringing services for federating data and infrastructure, computing infrastructure for Copernicus data and users. So these are coming into 4 main categories here. Of course, you have the provider, the federated set of providers, but you also have the Earth observation platform that is bringing this kind of processing and analytics capabilities for Earth observation data. You have the query services, the metadata query service, and also you have a set of workflow solutions in order to do some activities for monitoring of the Earth system. Their services as well, they are relying on EOSC core capabilities like AI, help desk, monitoring, and accounting. And as well, Cscale, because they are bringing a huge amounts of data from Copernicus, they are contributing directly to the EOSC Data Federation, by federating all of these data sources and making them available via this query catalog, and also using these common data access protocols. Now, regarding Reliance, which is the project that I am coordinating, so this project is bringing into the EOSC Exchange a set of research enabling services for the open, efficient, and cross-disciplinary management of the research lifecycle that allows the adoption of fair and open science principles. So the idea here is our services are enhancing the discovery of and the access to research data, including, of course, Earth observation data. So Copernicus as well is one of the key aspects that we are dealing with. Also, extraction of relevant knowledge from scientific texts and other scientific kind of resources. And also, the management of the research life cycle as a first-class entity. So that's one of the main characteristics of the project. The 3 main services here are the research object and the management platform, which is called ROHAB. We also have the advanced geospatial data management platform, which is called ADAM, and also a set of text mining services for enrichment, for recommendations, and discovery of resources. Our services are not contributing to the EOSC core, but we are relying on, again, also instead of EOSC core services, but also we are connecting many other different services from the EOSC Exchange. So here you see, for example, how we are connecting, of course, to AAI. We are connecting to OpenAir, which is harvesting, in the research graph, which is harvesting data about the research objects, but also we are connecting to Argos to create research objects from data management plans, or Zenodo and B2Share to publish releases of the research object, or B2Drop to use it as a personal storage, for example. So finally, just a few words about sustainability of our results. Of course, this will be, I suppose, one of the main topics for discussion later on the panel, but basically, it's of course very important that we can preserve all of our achievements and results and to continue to deliver this service in an operational mode. But in order to do that, of course, we need to get the support and funding, of course, to the providers of these services, right? So this includes the EOSC core provider, but also providers of some of the key or the key services coming from the EOSC exchange, providing this kind of horizontal activities. Of course, here important to understand is that the funding mechanisms should be different, or at least should consider different types of instruments that can allow not only the mature services to continue the production, but also to give room to innovation, to give new services coming into EOSC in the future. So with that, I'm finishing, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks very much, Raul. So we've looked at the core, we've looked at some parts of the exchange, but what's happening at the different regions around Europe? So you're probably aware that a number of regional projects have been formed involving a number of countries, and I'm pleased to welcome Isabel here, who's going to tell us about their contributions to the MVE.
Okay, this is for the slides, I guess, no? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Nice, I have them there. So I have collected some information from the regional projects. This has been all very quick, but and so I will speak about all the projects. So if you have questions, I believe there are representatives that they can help me out. This already, Bob went through that. I will know very well because I was sitting in the second high-level expert group the afternoon that we defined the MEV. And the question I remember very well, we had a hard afternoon to conclude that this was going to be a very heterogeneous landscape, and that the only way to pull something out of this was going to find the smallest common denominator, for EOSC, which is what we call the minimum viable ecosystem, right? And the actors here that were identified were the researchers, the software developers, the infrastructure providers, and the research funding organizations. So these are the elements that the second high-level expert group identified as needed to cooperate to bootstrap EOSC somehow, yeah. And then the thing has evolved, obviously. So there is you want to call it a virtuous cycle, yeah, which we have tried let's say, to put in place, in which best practices, fostering quality, will increase the adoption and contribute to create an ecosystem of services, software, and users that will create EOSC somehow. So in EOSC Synergy, you have, okay, let me concentrate on the four groups. For researchers, our contributions to the EOSC exchange is the thematic services, so the science cases, yeah, that we have been able to, let's say, migrate from standalone applications to EOSC integrated applications. By EOSC integrated, I mean using core services and following the verification of the data until the very end, so that data that are deposited there, they are fair by construction. Yeah. We are probably the only regional project that look into the software developers. Yeah, so we develop a model for that includes best practices and quality into the whole value chain, from software development to service deployment to fair data. At CSIC, my institution in Spain, which is the host of the home of more than 4,000 researchers, is the biggest institution for research in Spain. We have set up the FAIR Evaluator, which is a service that all the researchers can use at fair.csic.es, and you can check the fairness of your data sets there, yeah, from the institution. This is a very nice exploitation of the results, but I have there a capture of our webpage that you are welcome to have a look. So the vision here is, yeah, we try to promote that the software developers cooperate to create EOSC by providing incentives and fostering that EOSC recognize good quality services with, in a proper way, curriculum-wise, etc. Yeah. Infrastructure managers. Yeah, we have, this is the final result of the project, which finished 2 weeks ago, the handbook of EOSC integration. Our colleague here, Tobias, you mentioned the simple procurement. The simple procurement, I mean, there is a study done by Deloitte, I believe. This company has made a study about middlewares that are more or less ready to support a federation of clouds. And if you look into that study, you will find the EGI federated cloud as a prominent example, right? So we base our work on integrating resources that are on the federated cloud of EGI. And we also tackle the issue of HPC, which is something I believe which is urgently calling to the door for an integration of services and user communities. So we develop tools. We didn't do surveys in EOS Synergy, and I take pride on that. Yeah? But we develop tools for the EOS core, which are able to put together clouds and HPC resources with the best AI support that we could gather from our experts at KIT. Yeah? Policy harmonization, there is a lot of work done. This is really regional. This is the regional part, the policy harmonization. Yeah, that have to come together, and there has been a lot of discussions, etc. Because, let's say, the technical work cannot be regional. Yeah, we are in an international cooperation here. And then this, okay, I will skip this, but Helen will speak tomorrow about what we did for traders in the regional level session. Now I jump to the next project. This is EOS Pillar, which is still going on for the next month, I believe, coordinated by our colleagues of GAR. They made a number of non-technical contributions, as they call it, which is the policy frameworks. They did an extensive landscape mapping, and they contributed to the definition of indicators for the call that was organized in EOS Secretariat. And they created something interesting, which was the Ambassadors Program, which was a set of communication material in national languages to promote the existence of EOSC. Yeah? More technical contributions of EOS Pillar are related to the onboarding of services in the EOS catalog. I can imagine that helping this has been their participation in EOS Future, or the previous participation on EOS Hub, where the people involved in EOS Pillar had also things to say in this place. So in that sense, this has consolidated the work that they have been doing in other projects. Yeah? These are the challenges identified by Fulvio. So they need to really consolidate the model of onboarding. They need to work at the national level with funders. This all of us we have to do, obviously, and find the ways for better research and engagement. This is NIFOS for Europe. These are the contributions to the EOS core. So they have a pre-production environment, which is also integrated in the EOS core. They have an incubator, as they call, which is a test bed environment, so that people that has applications that they want to integrate in EOSC, they can try it out there, let's say in a toy area. Yeah? They use these core services, the help desk system, monitoring, accounting. I believe this is also based on the EGI federated cloud and tools, because I see the GOC database, the help desk, the monitoring system, Argo. This all works in the EGI federated cloud as well. And they have some integration guidelines. The contributions to the EOS Exchange, okay, these are the KPIs, I guess, so the number of onboarded services and communities, yeah, essentially, that are there, so they have everything in a nice catalog. This is a description of their input to the data federations. So they have done a magnificent work in integrating repositories, 37 repositories in total. So I guess this work has been very important for the region itself, where GRNet has been pulling from the developments. They were more mature, but they have been able really to bring many people up to speed. And finally, EOS Nordic. I believe Lene is around. So this is the Nordic project. They concentrated in creating a knowledge hub including materials, users, organization, a training library. So it's kind of compilation of what there is available in the Nordic countries that can help researchers integrate in EOSC. So this is the knowledge hub of EOS Nordic. They have included a discovery service for analysis for regional services. They have they did a work of identification of what is around, yeah, and put it in a way in which researchers can find it. Yeah. They set up a platform for regional collaboration and integration with EOSC, which is GDPR compliant, has been adopted by Euro HPC Lumi. That I can confirm myself because I logged in Lumi the other day, and you have to you have to go through that. Yeah, that works very well, and then it's integrated with the core services. Yeah. These are okay. They also had a program of EOS pioneers in which they identified a number of high-level researchers that will act, let's say, as champions of EOSC in the country in several areas. And these are the key results. Yeah, let's say the new tools to facilitate access and integration. They managed to increase FAIR uptake, or at least awareness on FAIR, EOSC alignment with the other projects that we also managed to do. Yeah. This is a bit of a summary, conclusions. So there are, as you see, a large number of contributions to the EOSC marketplace that come from the regional projects and for data federations. There is significant contributions to best practices and to, let's say, to foster the uptake of EOSC at several levels. The marketplace obviously has been greatly expanded with the regional projects. We had, policy-wise, we had a workshop, a joint workshop on the 4th of May, organized by EOS Synergy. We had, I believe, was the first workshop after the pandemic, and over 100 people came to Strasbourg to discuss about policy. And it was nice to see the alignment, no? Even in the country gap analysis and what is missing, what we will request from funding agencies in terms of strategy, etc. There was quite a good alignment, more than one could imagine at the beginning, looking at the geographical dispersion of this. So this is all that I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. So we will finish by looking at another element that contributes to the minimum viable EOSC, and that's the research infrastructures and the research communities. And they've been structured as science clusters. And today we have Niklas Blomberg, the director from Elixir, who's going to give us an overview of their contributions to the MVE.
Thank you, Bob. And as I said, as Bob said, I'm here as a representative of the five science clusters in Horizon 2020 investments for EOSC. And so what I'd like to do is to sort of pick up a few threads and illustrate that with examples cutting across all the different science clusters. So I'm not going to walk through the project one by one, but I think we've tried to identify a number of elements for the minimum viable EOSC. But before I start, I'd like to connect to and reflect on the introduction that Bob gave, and also Isabel picked up on how the sort of thinking of the MVE has developed from an ecosystem, and really we were arguing about a minimum viable ecosystem to what we see in some of the sort of descriptions of EOSC and architecture diagram, where EOSC is almost like a platform that sits in between the providers and the users, the scientists. And so I'd like to take a step back here and really think about that whole ecosystem. And I think the core of my argument, and so possibly I could stop here, is that the work from the research infrastructures and the science clusters is really going all the way from the users and then permeating down into that core and into that foundation. And I think that partnership, both with users and with the sort of E infrastructures, is really critical for a successful EOSC. And a really good example of this, I think, is the work that we have done in all of the clusters on our login system, our AI system, if you so want. And I think all of this sits on top of the work of the EOSC blueprint, so a common European specification for login systems. And then I think what you could say is that the individual science clusters have provided a bit of color, a bit of flavor to that common blueprint to adopt it for the needs of the researchers in the various domains. And so, for instance, the ESCAPE, which is the particle physics and astronomy cluster, have made sure that they can bring in some of their legacy RIs and the investments and the instruments that are using, if you want, legacy AI systems. We look at the PANOS cluster, and they've done a lot of work on their umbrella AI to link with EduGain, but also making sure that it connects up with the instruments and the experiments at all of the photon and neutron sources. If we look in life sciences, so the EOSC Life cluster, we've launched what we call Life Science Login, which is the same as the EOSC blueprint, the EOSC AI, but then adding on security features and specifications and global standards for management of sensitive data. So I think this is a really good example of how we sort of develop some core services within the clusters, and we do that together with e-infrastructure around the common blueprint. And I think that's a really important both lesson and recipe for success in EOSC going forward. So just a quick view on some of the, if you look at the exchange layer, if you want, of EOSC, some of the reusable services, data and scientific analysis tools. So if you look at ESCAPE, they've developed what they call a data lake and a virtual research environment. But really what it is a consistent tool set that is used by the national actors, and that reduces the complexity and drives the long-term sustainability, because a number of different experiments are using essentially the same toolkit for managing the data and analyzing the data. If we look at the social sciences, the SHOCK marketplace, they have developed and cataloged across all of the research infrastructures, really all of the services that are being used in the community. And a very similar work has been done both in EOSC Life, for life sciences, and in the MVE FAIR project. So just here is more detailed on the ESCAPE, but rather than going through all the details, I just want to point to some features here. I mean, we see a number of sort of user-facing services, Jupyter notebooks, cloud deployment services, but we also see the link to publishing, and so the link to the Zenodo archives. And so we can see how these sort of configurable services are being used in different type of experiments to provide user value. And you can also see that some of the sort of EOSC core services, the help desk and so on, has been brought into the ESCAPE offerings. If we look at EOSC Life, and I mentioned that earlier today, but really the outcome of EOSC Life is a set of tools, a set of services that are now being, so that was brought together in what we call the roadmap, really. So a way of working on these services jointly between the research infrastructures when we are doing sort of user support in the facilities. And that roadmap, if you so want, has been very successful and is now used in a whole range of new EOSC projects, and actually also for transnational access projects. And so the vast majority of research infrastructures, their core business is, of course, to run experimental facilities for users. And so the transnational access raises a lot of questions on data management. And again, similar to ESCAPE, we are addressing that with a common set of tools and services. This is really what has enabled us to respond very quickly to the COVID pandemic. So in the project of By COVID, but really the work feeding into the European COVID-19 data portal is really based on this sort of set of services, and that's what enabled us to very quickly mobilize data from a whole range of different actors, whether it's projects, whether it's public health, research infrastructures, or indeed European initiatives and large sort of cohorts. We were talking about data, and so of course EOSC wouldn't be viable without data, and so I picked out a couple of, I think, really nice examples from the PANOSC project. So that's the photon and neutron sources, they've been working on what they call the human organ atlas, so high-level imaging from the from the instruments. And actually the images here are really stunning, and one of the images have won a prize in National Geographic for a scientific illustration. But I think what it shows what you actually can achieve when you start to federate data and bring that together over a range of different modalities into a common platform. Similar in the social sciences, there is a large corpora now of parliamentary records for sort of studying the debates around COVID-19 in different European policy fora. And the PANOSC projects have brought this, and I think this is we have similar activities in all of the clusters, but I think this is a really nice example of how you can achieve a federated search over the institutional and experimental data sources with a common sort of specification of an API. So I'd like to finish with just maybe the major contribution of the science clusters to not only a minimal but really a viable European Open Science Cloud is of course the interface with the users, and so I'd like to give a few examples of how the projects have also done direct user support. This is from the ENVI-FAIR project, so the environmental cluster. I think that it's a really sort of compelling way of structuring different user groups, different sort of communities of concerns, and then providing entry points into their service catalog, which is specified or specific to that user community. I think that's something that we all can learn from, and I think it's a great source of inspiration. If we look at some of the other clusters, so in EOSC Life, which I've been leading, we have been running a set of open calls to the communities, and in total we've had 27 projects being supported from these various open calls. I think these are two really nice examples. One is from actually from historic England. It turns out that you can look at microscopic silica bodies inside plants and understand what varieties were grown in different parts of Europe. So that's a fantastic resource for historic research that we've worked with and tried to make their data fair. So finding common specifications, ontologies and listings for that data for the research community. We've been working with industry partners. So this is work from our partners in Freiburg and a small Swiss company who actually wanted to move their whole software analysis platform for foodborne genomics onto the public cloud. They didn't see a value in proprietary analysis. They could work on open platforms because their added value to the customer was really in the service they provided to the customer, not in the software. So again, I think a really nice example of how you can partner with industries around open science and still find opportunities for sort of private actors to make money. And finally, I think this is, of course, our colleagues in the ESCAPE cluster, so astronomy, have a marvelous citizen science program, and this is one of the several projects. This is on spotting black holes in astronomic images, and again, it's running out of a consistent set of EOSC services. So I'd like to stop there, and thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Nicholas, and thanks to all the speakers for keeping to time. That was very well behaved. Thank you very much. Now we have time for questions. We didn't take questions going through. We wanted to keep them to the panel discussion at the end. But for the panel, I'd like to invite two more people to come along. Stefan Hanslick from the Austrian Ministry, and also a member of the steering board, if you'd like to come up and join us there, so we can have a member state point of view as well. And Dale Robertson from EGI Foundation, who is co-chair of the Task Force for Financial Sustainability, one of the key points here. So we will have time, we'll bring up questions here. We'll also, with the help of Sarah, try to monitor what's going on for Slido. We have approximately half an hour for the panel, so you'll have your chances to speak. But to start things off, maybe I can start with a provocative question. A number of you have highlighted your contributions to the minimum viable EOSC already. So, do we believe that the MVE exists today? Who would put their hands up? Okay, Klaus? Okay, first of all, can we have a show of hands from the panelists, whether you believe the MVE exists today? Okay, 1, 2, 2.5, 4. And the audience? Okay, there's slightly more than 4. I think we have about 8, something like that. Okay. So for those that have said they believe it exists, maybe like to give you justifications. Take a microphone.
Well, I could be a little bit, how do you call it, cocky about it and say, well, by definition, it is the minimal viable because we were not able to get more, so this is what we got. But I think that's there's much more to it. I honestly believe that we got very far in the past 2 years or so. As far as we would have hoped, no. But I honestly believe we have now a functioning MVE.
Okay, thank you very much. So, and I think there's some advances shown there. Niklas, you said as well. Now, in your answer, we can bring in one of the questions that's from the audience on Slido. It says, what's the harmonization about this? Because the research infrastructures are important contributors to the EOSC and the MVE, but also they have many important users that could be it. So what's your opinion on the status?
So if we start with the MVE, and I was a little bit up and down, I think it depends on how you define. If you think about it as a viable ecosystem, I think we've made great strides. And we have a lot of conversations today. We have a lot of services that are connected that wouldn't have been connected if we haven't made the investments in EOSC over the years. If we think of MVE as a solid platform that forms a foundation for a lot of research activities, I don't think we're quite there. But my argument is I think that's the wrong view of EOSC. I think we need to look at it more as an ecosystem. That said, I think there is that core, and that brings me to your question. I think there is a core of services that we need to look at and operate. And in my mind, the AAI, so the ability of users to log in seamlessly to services across Europe is really fundamental to there. And I think that is one of the services where we are, I think, very well harmonized. And the flavors that we see, I think, are flavors that will be needed. And I think moving from that, I think the next step will need to be looking at accounting principles. So how do we make sure that so the future will be very federated. Researchers will need to access infrastructure that sits by national providers throughout Europe. That providing infrastructure, running calculation from in Finland by a Spanish researcher will cost money. That needs to be reimbursed, and we need to find models that work for this, not only for sort of free at the point of use, but it should be possible for, say, an ERC grantee to plan for the use of infrastructure analysis services and there have upfront costs. And I think that's an area which we need to look at. But if we manage to crack that, I think we really will make great strides.
Thank you very much. You highlighted the financial aspects. We'll come to those later in the questions as well. Stefan.
Yes, thank you. I only want to echo what my previous speaker said. Let me first of all congratulate you to all your efforts because even when you talked a lot about it, but you also created a lot. And I think the ecosystem is a very living ecosystem. And coming back to your question, when I look at the minimum viable EOSC, it is not minimum because after all these explanations and only these short introductions into what has been achieved, you immediately see that this is an existing and living thing. Even when there are some things missing, maybe in future, but it is something which is, let's say, realistic and not theoretical. And all not only the architecture behind it, but also the fact that European infrastructures and European service layers are interacting with each other. I think this is for me the minimal viable EOSC. And again, I want to congratulate you, and please carry on with it. I think there are, especially in the field of integrating more infrastructures and more work of the, let's say, scientific community at these infrastructures. This would be a big challenge for us, but I've also seen in the previous talks of today that there are some efforts also politically seen to integrate more big infrastructures, and don't forget the small ones, that they are also very critical mass in this field, especially those who are located at universities and research performing organizations. And what is also convincing me is that other infrastructures like big collections of museums are also part of this visible EOSC part. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So, of those people who didn't put their hands up, maybe you could explain what you think is missing from the MVE.
Yeah, I'll make a provocative question too. What has changed for a researcher like I am in the last 15 years regarding access to infrastructures? The perception, at least that people have, is that data became more important. Taking good care of data is more important, is more appreciated. There is money behind it that they also notice. So there is a change a bit in mentality in that respect. As I say, I can log in Lumi and I will not pay per for that because the commission already paid. So no, it's not a joke, it's the policy part. Yeah, this is the policy part. But what else has changed? Yeah? The AI worked in a magnificent way, as here Niklas pointed out. But how long did it took? How many ARC projects it took to come up with an architecture that finally it could be implemented, etc. So this does not come from one day to the next. Yeah, and 50. Yeah, exactly. You know very well. So this takes a lot of time. But this is, in my view, probably the most pragmatic implementation that people can just swim around Europe with. That is a very good thing. But right now, if you go to a research center like mine, and even to large research institutions, and people ask, what can EOSC do for me? There is a lot of unawareness, I'm afraid, of that. Yeah. And in that sense, I believe there is a policy work that has not been done yet. Yeah? When we define those groups as the players of the minimum viable ecosystem, there was another slide that I didn't show, but I have it, saying that it is the policymakers that have to create the conditions for these three actors, researchers, developers, and infrastructure managers, to cooperate and bootstrap the whole thing. Yeah? Because if tomorrow you cut the money, the European funds, etc., for this, you can say goodbye to EOSC, so it's not sustainable. Yeah? And sustainability comes with the appreciation of the users and publications, and that they see they can work there, etc. Yeah? So there is, in my view, a global policy component which needs to be strengthened. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So on this question, does anybody want to add something from the audience? I don't see any hands. So let's take the assumption that we have an ecosystem, if not a single platform, of the MVE at the moment. All right? How do you see that evolving in the near future? Raul, would you like to add something here?
Well, I think that the one of the first thing that when we started all of this discussion was what was missing, that you were saying, of course, and how we can go into the next steps. So, as it was said before, from my point of view also, there has many things that have been happening during the last few years. Really, I mean, of course, that's why I say that it's also, I think that there is something minimum that we can work on. Of course, it's missing a lot of things, and especially the adoption from the users. I mean, even if you see all these big numbers in presentations and things like that, I mean, there are already a lot of people. But if you really go to researchers, to the real work institutions and things, a lot of people, they don't know still about the EOSC. And they are still even confused about the connection of EOSC with other initiatives coming from the Commission, like Gaia-X or big data, big DVA, all of these different kind of things that coming together, how they connect to each other and how they will really will support researchers in their daily work, which was also mentioned here. So from my point of view, the sustainability comes from the fact as well on the adoption of the users, which is the most important thing that we need to do as chaos community to really bring into to the researchers. So these events are nice because we are providers and we are, a lot of technicians and so on, but we really need to do this at big scale to the research communities.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. So keeping on that point, we can pick up probably something on the Slido saying that to attract users, you need to have the services, you need to be there available, and the data. Of course, we mustn't forget the data, right? We have those things there. But so the question is asking, people will come into the MVE when the cost of integrating into the MVE is lower than the added value. Okay, so you get more added value than it costs to integrate into VE. A number of you sitting around here in the projects you've been operating, you've highlighted that you've integrated a number of service providers into the catalogs, into this growing platform. Maybe you could just elaborate on what you see as that ratio at the moment. Is there added value, or is it costing you more at the moment? Niklas.
So there are parts, for instance, the EOSC marketplace, where I think the jury is very much out if it provides added value. And the reason for that is that the journey in for most of the users that we see in the different research infrastructures is very different. They wouldn't go to a marketplace. They typically come to a experimental facility, for instance, a marine outstation. They would go out, they would make samples, they would prepare their samples. They might take the samples to some of the advanced light microscopy facilities provided by Eurobioimaging, and then they want to run an analysis pipeline over that data. And so that's one of the user projects we've been running in EOSC Life. And so nowhere in that sort of workflow of a user is there a need for a portal with EOSC services. And actually, most of the users will never know that they have been using EOSC. They are just working with the facilities and getting excellent support to first manage their data, analyze their data. And so, for instance, if we look at Euroscience Gateway, the services provided by Galaxy is critical, but nowhere would the user think about EOSC. It's sort of the underwear of scientific computing. You don't see it, but it's really quite important. And so I think that's where we really need to think very carefully, where do we invest our money? Because we will need to benchmark services in terms of utility for the user communities. Mm-hmm. And I think this sort of foundation and the enablement of already existing user-facing infrastructures or research organizations is really quite important. And maybe that's where the added value of some of the EOSC components have been quite low.
You want to add something, Klaus?
Yeah, if I can. I also think that we need to be careful with too soon making those assessments. In the dead microphone, I just said that it took us 15 years to come up with the ARC blueprint. Well, a bit less, 15 years to get it widely deployed. It takes time to build this. And I would come back to what Nicholas said before, the long vision we need to talk about. And I hope that everybody here in the room buys into the vision of EOSC. I certainly do. And I think what we are now doing is trying to get that critical mass in place. And we need to accept that in some areas that takes longer, in other areas it goes much faster. Everybody is happy with the AI. Well, I'm very happy that people are happy with that, because that's where I spent most of my professional life working on. But it did take a long time, and it will take a long time for more difficult services to integrate, to bring them. And for that reason, I think it is very important that we keep supporting this, and maybe, going to Isabel's point, maybe it's also the new generation of researchers that will make use of all these extra capabilities that we provide. Maybe if you have your PhD assignment and that tells you to work in a certain scientific domain, it's not top of mind to look across to other domains. So maybe we should start stimulating that, and maybe we should. There was a picture of Anne Fouillou on the screen as one of the EOSC Nordic champions, I think the word was. She's a perfect example for this new generation of scientists that make clever use of the fact that they can seamlessly access resources from different science domains. And I think we will get more of them if we keep building on this platform.
Okay. Carol, you wanted to add something from the audience?
The microphone works? Yeah, yes. It does. I like very much what Nicolas was saying, that there is a connection, and I like what Klaas is saying, there is an AAI. These are all essential ingredients, but most of the talk is about services. These are also essential. If there's nothing served, then nothing happens. But data is an important aspect, I thought, of EOSC as well. And fair is essential. We all say this is an ingredient under everything. If it's not fair, it's not part of. I assume you've all heard the presentation of Martin from Roche just before. So my question is, in the minimum viable EOSC you call operational, where are the fair data? Who checks the fairness? Who checks the rules of participation?
There is, that's a very good point. But Lucy, in my own community, we generate petabytes of data in supercomputers. Yeah. Where do we place them? So we leave them in the supercomputer, fine. Yeah. And then people ask, you need to curate those data, you need to add metadata, fine. That is an effort that needs to have an added value, as Bob was pointing out. That the researcher spends time doing that needs to pay off. And it needs to work in a sense that this effort is maintained over time. Let me put it this way. People cannot spend 1 month of their time curating data that will be kept in that repository until Christmas, because over Christmas the funding is over, and I don't know where the data will go. So either we really take serious that data needs to be preserved, and that goes beyond the will of researchers. I think we all understand that if you spend, I don't know how many million euros in power consumption, in electricity to generate those data, take care of them, because it's not for free. But we also need to know that it will be preserved. Yeah.
I'm not the one spending millions of euros. I would like to, but I don't have them. I'm one of those researchers, and I think it's a responsibility of the research performing organizations, the organizations that employ the researchers, to see to it that this is managed. Not of the researchers, of the organizations. The researchers cannot do that.
Yep. I think the question of responsibilities is for preservation and so on is one of the key subjects being discussed by one of our other task forces, which are meeting in parallel to this session at the moment, unfortunately. Okay, but Nicolas and Raoul, you both raised the question of costs. Isabel touched on this as well. Dale, as co-chair of the task force, you've been spending far more hours than you should have looking at how the financial sustainability of EOSC should evolve. Maybe you could explain a little bit about that for us.
Yeah, okay, so there's a little bit of how long have you got about all of this, but so just to explain a few words then. So our task force has just in the last couple of days, published an interim progress report, which is available on the EOSC.eu website, actually. So the proposals, they're interim proposals, which describe our work so far. They are available for you to see. Very, very difficult to summarize in, a minute or whatever, but just to give you a taste of some of the points that we've made in our report. For the core, we are proposing that the EOSC core should be funded by public money from the member states and the EC, the proportion of each to be determined, to be discussed. Potentially also the associated countries as well, and a number of other points to be discussed further, which I won't go into just now. The exchange, we've looked at different categories of services, and I think we have attempted to, I think we have succeeded in identifying the universe of services, if you like, that would be in the EOSC exchange and putting them all into subsets. Two categories I would mention. So, ostensibly it's a marketplace where services are brokered, but there are particular subsets that I think should be mentioned. One is that we have suggested that there should be a pool, a limited pool of services which receive public subsidy, which would be for the good of users of the EOSC. And also there's a subset of what we've called novel services, so services that should receive a public subsidy temporarily that would tail off, but would help to just stimulate the usage of those services. So bringing something new and innovative into the EOSC, but providing the sort of, I don't know if seed funding is quite the right term for it, but providing some financial support to continue those services. So that's a taster on those two components of EOSC. On the data federation, so this kind of chimes with Carol's question actually, and this was why I didn't raise my hand saying I thought the MVE had been achieved, not because I feel negatively about EOSC or because I don't think very highly of the huge amount of work that is going on and all that has been achieved, because I think there is an enormous amount that has been done, but there simply is so much more to do. And in particular with the Data Federation, my feeling about the MVE was I can't define what is in the MVE when it comes to data. And that was kind of very crudely why I didn't raise my hand. So it's not to say that we're not getting there and that things are not picking up pace and so on. And of course, there are lots of very valuable assets there. But the seamlessness, the ease of use for the users, I think there's already been a mention of simply awareness by users. These things are not, to my mind, quite there enough yet to be able to say, yes, we've got past that sort of line in the sand of, yes, we've achieved the critical mass. Beyond, the idea was beyond which the inner energy of the whole endeavour would carry things further fairly naturally in itself. I don't think we're quite there yet. But certainly I don't think that's, I don't feel negatively about it. I just think we've got more work to do.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we have a comment or a question from the audience as well.
Yeah, hello, my name is Carsten Heuer-Klick from the German Aerospace Center, and I want to jump back to the added value. And there is a number of initiatives coming up with fair data and developing fair infrastructures, and it's especially young people, as Klaas said. But all these initiatives, or many of them, are struggling with sustainability. So, and I think EOSC is one of the chances to provide a safe harbor for all these different initiatives, to move this into a common infrastructure or common scheme or whatever, where these things last. And I think this is one of the added values, and this is one example why I'm here, because I'm one of these initiatives in energy systems analysis, and we want to move into EOSC to have a sustainable solution.
Okay, can I just come back to that and see if we can understand? For you, sustainability, do you mean you're looking for someone else to pay for it?
Yes and no. One thing is, of course, if there is, I also made this comment before in the financing of Copernicus, there is ways where you can provide some basic financing, but is to develop solutions which are used by many people, by a large community, not everyone with his own solution, but giving community solution makes it also much easier to become sustainable in the long term. Yeah. So this is maybe the more important part than financing.
Okay, and I think that comes back to one of the questions we had on Slido earlier about this whole question of going through the costing of things, starting off in research, and that we are tending towards being projects which are better innovation rather than production. And then the funding models that Dale has outlined are looking more at how we worry about the operations rather than the innovation. Yeah? And one of the things that has been highlighted in the questions as well is this cross-border aspect of supporting financially these services and so on, which at the moment is proving difficult. Raoul, in some of the projects you mentioned, you talked about the use of the virtual access mechanism, which is again using European Commission money, but is providing a mechanism for which you could support some of these services. Maybe you could explain a little bit more of those?
Well, I mean, I wanted to say on this regard, like, of course, I completely agree with what you were saying before about making more easy the use of those services to put data and to make the data accessible and so on. But I think it's a bit of, in the sustainability part, a bit of like chicken egg problem, because it's like we need to have some, to make sustainable services that are really being used. And for that, we need, of course, a critical mass of researchers that are really using our services. But in order to make these researchers to use our services, they are at the moment afraid. I mean, that's one of the main impressions that I have from talking like people like Anne, which is one of our researchers in Reliance project, that they are afraid of what will happen with the services after the projects end. So in this case, of course, everybody is aware that we are providing and promising that services will be available free at point of access for the duration of the projects, but they are not sure if they really would spend, like Isabel was saying, such amount of time to make this data, create or put it in some other repositories, which they don't really know yet how they will be sustained or if they will be sustained. So that's, the chicken egg problem for me that I was just saying.
Nicholas, you wanted to add something?
So I think part of that is probably related to what Karel brought up on who judges fair. And so I think it's a very difficult proposition to have groups that judge the fairness of other scientists' output. Science is more of a sort of republic of minds where the community come to those conclusions. But as we're moving into operations, and I think that's probably the relationship, we need to start to think about user value. Because if you want to operate something, you will have to make choices about what you pay for and what you don't pay for, and that requires quite careful monitoring of user value. And I think one of the parts here is we need to be very careful and think about who is EOSC for. Is it, are we marketing EOSC as a direct-to-consumer product, like T-shirts or sort of consumer goods, or is it more something that is marketed business to business, something that enables institutions to work within a common market or a single market for research? And that will then suddenly make the questions on, well, fairness much easier, because it's about enabling, say, research infrastructures or institutional repositories or national archives to provide a set of services to their users. And the different user communities will probably have quite a good view on what they see as fair in their community. And arguably the most important part of fair is the R, the reuse. So you might have data sets that are used once and produce a very insightful piece of science, but is never ever looked at again. And then we have data sets coming out of scientific instruments that are used by thousands of researchers essentially every week. And so that sort of reuse is, of course, a really important measure of fairness, because that tells us where we need to invest in sort of long-term maintenance.
Mm-hmm. Okay. We have two questions here from yourself and George.
Well, this is more a remark than a question, if I may, Bob. And I am very pleased by what Nicolas just said, because it is exactly on this point that I would like to reiterate. By the way, the R may be the most important, the I is the most difficult letter in the four, but apart from that, we are propagating open science, rightfully so. I think it's an important development. We're trying to build EOSC as a support system in that open science community. And we're all the time saying we're changing science and the way the scientists operate and the way they have to work and the reward system, etc., etc., etc. And I can go on for an hour. We should also talk about the duty and tasks of the financing bodies, the funders, including the European Commission, and of the organizations, the receiving bodies of those funds, and their responsibilities. Rather than only talk about what the scientists should do different, the funders should see to it that the organizations they fund live up to their promises of making the data fair, keeping the data there. And then in line with what the question was in the back there, this should be done jointly in order to make it cheap. If we do it case by case for every individual project, it becomes extremely expensive and impossible, and it will not happen. So we should put more pressure on the funders and on the receiving institutions, as well the performing institutions as the service providing institutions, to make something in common and to make it alive for a long time.
Yeah, thank you. Giorgio, and then we had another question over here.
Thank you. We started this session hearing about the procurement process. That means a first sizable investment for a piece of EOSC or prototype piece for EOSC. Now, my question is how this will impact the architecture of the EOSC, how this first element, which seems to be, connectivity between data spaces and etc., is helping, or is just one first example of actions that may help converging to a good workable prototype then to be refined later in the future. I haven't heard any comment about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Tobias?
Yes. Thank you, Giorgio. I hope it works.
Yes, yes.
I'll take probably this occasion for a slightly longer reflection. And I give you also my limits on this, because it's really nice to be here. I take Klaas by his word. It's probably too early to judge. That's why I didn't raise my hand, because I'm on EOSC for 4 weeks now. So just take this as a framework. And if I don't answer your point concretely, we'll get back to this. So what I'd like to share with you, the last, 1.5 days, it feels like a week on this symposium already. I have really shown what we are doing, what you are doing, what we are doing here is impressive. It's amazing, and it is overwhelming, to be quite honest. And I'd like to come from this. And I think one question, and this is where we link, and that's also where we link to the question how we integrate different projects, is how do we integrate? And actually I'm very, very grateful for the partial reply provided by Raoul and by Isabel on this. So how do we integrate? That was one of the questions. And you've shown an excellent slide there on the core platform, on the difference. And then you've made, actually we should combine our slides, where I just put a red box and then you came with yours. And then you've shown how the different projects contribute to what. And I think that's very important to see. I mean, this EOSC procurement is one central piece, but it's not the only one. And there are other parts that are complementing. No, first I go to Isabel and then come with my own assessment. So that's the first element. You answered it, Raoul. Isabel, you made it very clear for the example of Simple. When a study was performed to look into Simple, and Simple is really, as I said, the smart middleware to glue together all databases. Where did they look at? Well, they looked broadly, huh? But where did they found? They found it in EOSC. So what I'm saying is we're not reinventing the wheel. Neither do we in EOSC nor in the data spaces. These things are growing together, and I hope they're kind of growing like this and not in a spiraling mode. And the third element probably to consider, and that would be my part of the answer to you, is I personally believe, and I must say I'm not heavily involved in procurement yet, by default, in order to be here and to talk, to keep these two lines of work separated, is the procurement will deliver a starting point. It will deliver an important starting point, so we are going to build on this. But what will it do? I think with this also, we will, I think probably in a more tangible way than now, understand what it means to be EOSC compliant. We heard the word, I don't know who said it from you, of EOSC compliant, and I love the word, but what does it mean? What exactly, if you break it down to real points, does it mean? I hope this answers your question. But now that I have the floor, and if you don't mind, I'll just continue with these considerations.
Carry on.
I'll be quick still, Bob. So I think that was interesting. We see really moving forward on the services that we provide, how they're coming together, how we get the services there. But I think the other point touched upon is we see a strong push. Where's the pull? Do we have enough pull? So what is the users there? And we see this in one of the questions, is that if only 1/3 of the people understand the FAIR principles, I think that's more or less, I don't know, it's too small for me, but I think that's more or less the numbers I see there. I think it's important to understand for users, we need professional services. I've been working as a scientist for some time. We need trustworthy services, and we need, what you said, we need to make sure that the service remains. I don't want to go into this web page, another one, put my data there. I want to be sure that there is kind of a sustainability, of a continuity of this. And I think just as a third element and consideration, sorry for taking so long, it is really nice to see the showcases and really where we can get if we push the boundaries. If we push the boundaries of open science, if we push the boundaries of bringing together data across disciplines, and we've seen this in the COVID-19 platform. I think we've seen this on some others. That was the intention of bringing here forward the idea of Destination Earth, to really see if we push the boundaries of data, of principles, of bringing together and bridging between different constituencies and creating an interactive ecosystem, pushing technology boundaries, we can actually deliver, and we deliver on something for which there's a need. I'll stop here.
Okay.
If I can,
yes, go ahead.
Can I add a few things? I want to go back to what Dale said about public funding. I think it is important to realize that infrastructure is very hard to get customers to pay for. Niklas used the word underwear. I don't like that, because end users spend insane amounts of money on underwear, judging by all the shops that sell that stuff. I prefer to use the word plumbing. Nobody wants to spend money on the sewer in the street. You want to take care of your own house, but not of the street. And I think we have to accept that things like the plumbing, but also the community building, the work that the EOSC Association does, for example, I think for forever or for a very long time, that needs to be funded through public means. It's something for us all, from us all, and should be paid by our tax money.
Okay, thank you. Stefan, one remark, and then we have one question. Go ahead. Go ahead, Stefan. Yes?
I'll be short. Thank you. I also want to reply on your intervention. In a function of a plumber here, yeah, because we have to take care about, aside from as a civil servant, we have to take care about the taxpayers' money, and we do this since centuries in Europe. We spend enormous amounts of money into research infrastructures, big ones, medium ones, small ones. And I think this is the big critical mass of those who are able to produce these enormous amounts of data. And then I'm back to the funding. I totally agree with you that the EOSC-related services have to be funded in a sustainable manner. But we also have to ask the question, what is about the data? And because they are also part of this publicly funded system, so it is a public good with a very high value. And I think this is also because we are doing all these efforts just to save it and to preserve it in a sustainable manner.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I think we had a question from the audience. So this gentleman on the right was first.
Thank you. So my name is Andreas Petzold. I'm from Research Center Jülich, and I'm here from two perspectives. I'm on one side co-coordinating a research infrastructure, so I'm an atmospheric scientist, and I'm also coordinating the MVE project, so I have both kind of views. And I want to reflect a bit on the on the role I see EOSC for the research infrastructure. So as an operational research infrastructure, we need to operate daily, provide our data on a daily basis to users, for instance, like Copernicus services. They consume them on a regular basis, and we provide them publicly to the scientific community worldwide. That means here we rely on highly specialized services we develop by our own. So from our perspective, on the other hand, EOSC can play a fundamental role when it comes to the point, for instance, to increase fairness of data, because as scientists, we want to do science, and we do not want to spend too much time on making data fair. Having automated services or having highly developed services available which helps us in this job, that can be a fundamental role EOSC can play for us, that it helps us doing our, let's say, operational work in a way that we prepare our data management services to run in an automated way. That is what we do in the cluster projects, and what we would really like to see as additional services coming in from EOSC to adopt that. We will never see, and I'm pretty confident that we will never see these highly specialized data analytics frameworks or anything like that on EOSC, which we use as scientists, because the approaches we use may not naturally fit to other domains. EOSC should give us these broader, more generic services where it makes us really getting rid of too much work on that sense, that we can focus again on our scientific work. That would be a great input, and I think that would be really consumed by the scientific communities. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone would like to comment? I think we've reiterated the point of the sustainability of the FAIR data sets as being an important service that people would like to see inside EOSC. Yeah?
Maybe just comment briefly in terms of the work that we did in our task force looking at the financial sustainability aspects relating to data federation. And the challenge we faced was, what is data federation? Where is data federated? And you know, what model, what architecture would it have? These things are not really clear, they're not really defined. So we spent quite a lot of time discussing this sort of thing, actually. And I think that relates to something also that was commented, I think by Niklas, but maybe by somebody else earlier on, that I think where the costs are incurred in terms of data federation, also I think relates to how big do you want the islands of data federation to become? You know, do you want absolutely everything to become interoperable, or do you say no? Well, actually, in terms of demand for reuse, there are some forms of combination of different types of disciplines, different types of data that are just not very plausible. The demand to combine utterly disparate things is potentially not going to arise. And so do you really absolutely need to make one single universal data federation, or do you say, okay, you know, the cost of that is probably enormous, and the time taken to do it, and the effort to produce metadata schemas that would be interoperable, and to, you know, backward work all the services and so on to make this work. These are big efforts. Is there the justification? Is there the demand to be able to do this? We don't have answers for all of this stuff, but we did at least contemplate these sorts of questions. And it kind of raises this question of, do you have this, do you aim for this one single giant data federation, or do you see a model of kind of puddles, so a bit along the lines of clusters, you know, and a bit back to what Andreas has just said about what the benefits would be of EOSC depending on which hat he's wearing and how he's looking at things, really. And these were the sorts of things that we contemplated in the task force, and we proposed different possible potential architectures or models for the data federation and looked a little bit at where the kind of costs are incurred and what the different cost categories are. That was as far as we've had time to get, so we don't have answers. We do have some questions for people that we'd like some feedback on, really, to try to progress some of these issues.
Okay. And I say that as the task force, you still have further work to do, but it's going on. We're running out of time. So I'd like to take the last question from the audience. Mark.
Thanks, Bob. Mark Dietrich from EGI Foundation. Very quickly, one of the conundrums in any e-infrastructure investment is the challenge of meeting the needs of your most demanding user. that most demanding user is going to be constantly disappointed by your platform. And yet, getting those most demanding users to use that platform is going to establish the adoption, is going to establish the social credibility of and success of that platform. So there needs to be an appropriate model that says, okay, this is how we're going to support these most excellent researchers in getting their most excellent science created, while at the same time creating a platform that can meet, as Andreas mentioned, a lot of needs across a broad range. So it's always going to be a challenge. It's always going to be a question. And I think it's something that needs to be actively managed day by day. And it also means that every infrastructure has to have a strategy for talking to users, for supporting users, for co-designing with users to make sure that it's still relevant and still supporting their needs.
Thank you very much, Mark. Nicholas, you want to add something?
I just want to pick up on that, and I think that's really coming back to the presentation I gave. I think that's the core of why it's important to see the research infrastructures as an integral component of EOSC and not a user of EOSC, because that very advanced segment will probably sit associated with one of our advanced research infrastructure facilities, one of the big instruments in Europe, whether it's a particle accelerator, whether it's a genomic database, whether it's an advanced light microscopy facility. And so they will, of course, push the boundaries because they are pushing the boundaries of science. And that pushing of the boundaries is probably best done outside the transversality of a generic E-infrastructure. But at the same time, we want to have a platform that is common across Europe, which defines what we do together. And I think that sort of link between the big tip of the sort of the pushing the boundaries of science and the transversality in a way sets the roof of where we define the common EOSC, what is provided to all, and where the individual facilities slot in and then provide that sort of sharpness to push the boundary of science. Because we want that. We want Europe to be leading in science, and we don't want to be constrained by the needs of a generic platform. So I think that's really at the core of how we link the research infrastructures and the E-infrastructures in EOSC.
Okay. I'll have to draw it to a close now. As a chairman, I have to stop you on time. Now, just to finish this, I think we started this whole session with a question about the MVE. And I asked you, first of all, whether or not the MVE exists. The majority of you came back and said, yes, the MVE exists, but perhaps as an ecosystem rather than a single unified platform today. That's something to aim for towards that platform. The other thing that came up is that we have to sort of foster the idea that if EOSC becomes successful, it becomes invisible, almost like the plumbing, the sewerage system. So you don't actually know it's there, but you're making use of it. And that itself will take a long time. The example was given 15 years for the AAI system. So we shouldn't be disappointed if we don't have that unified platform across all disciplines here today, but we've got elements on it, and it's going to expand as we go forward. The other question is, how do we have to interact with the end users? And are we interacting with the end users, or is it more business-to-business style interaction, as Nicholas outlined? And is that second business that we're interacting with, is that really the funding agencies or the research performing organizations which are setting the policies? And with that point, I'd just like to finish and say that the question of sustainability came up and as a fundamental question. Many of the researchers are looking for ways to ensure that the services they use will be there in the long term. They're looking for a safe harbor for their data in the long term as well. And with that, I think we have more than enough work to carry on with for the next few years, up to 2025. I'd like to thank all of the panelists and speakers for your very active contributions. The same thing for the audience, and also for the people online for the questions via Slido. Thank you very much.
Okay, just before you leave, a couple of information. So now for the people that are part of an Horizon Europe project, there is this gathering in the room Nadir, which is here on the right. So go there for that meeting. Tomorrow morning, we are organizing this visit to the ELI facility, is the Extreme Light Infrastructure Facility. We still have seats available. If you're interested in going and visit the infrastructure, so just sign up at the registration or tell my colleague Rosa there, Rosa, wave. So if you want to go and visit ELI, go. Tomorrow we start at 9, so there are all breakout sessions from now on, so I cannot chase you individually, so please make sure you go to the sessions on time. Thank you very much. Bye.